On 5 News, Boris Johnson's bombshell. He pulls out of the race to become the next Prime Minister.
Having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
His Brexit ally, Michael Gove, is going for the job. He's accused of betrayal after attacking Boris's leadership credentials.
I came, as I say, reluctantly but firmly to the conclusion that while Boris has many talents and attributes, he wasn't capable of building that team.
It leaves Home Secretary Theresa May as the new front-runner.
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country.
Also, are interest rates about to fall? The Governor of the Bank of England suggests they could be cut this summer. As an official report into the deaths of children in a Bristol hospital says patients were put at risk, the family of one boy who died speak out.
It's not making people accountable for allowing that ward to be that unsafe.
A court victory for a woman who wants to use her dead daughter's frozen eggs to give birth to her own grandchild. And after the race are out the Oscars, the British stars who will help choose next year's nominations. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. A week certainly does feel like a long time in politics, doesn't it? This time last Thursday, we were voting on whether the UK should leave the EU. Since then, the Prime Minister stepping down and the Labour leaders refusing to. Today, further shocks in a move that no one foresaw. Boris Johnson, the man favourite to be the next Prime Minister, ruled himself out of the race. It came after the man who stood beside him as they campaigned to leave, Michael Gove, deserted him, saying he would now run for the job. His likely main rival, the Home Secretary Theresa May, who confirmed her candidacy as well. Our political editor Andy Bell reports now on a day of drama.
It was supposed to be the launch of his campaign. They were expecting him to say he should be the next party leader. Instead, this.
But I must tell you, my friends, you who have waited faithfully for the punchline of this speech, that having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
Look at the faces of the MPs backing him. They hadn't expected that. This man sank his bid. Justice Secretary Michael Gove had been at Boris Johnson's side during the referendum and for the leadership. But this morning, in a surprise move, he entered the race himself and later skewered his old partner, damning him with faint praise.
Boris is a big character with great abilities, and I enjoyed working with him during the referendum campaign, when he campaigned with great energy and enthusiasm. But there is something special about leading a party and leading a country, and I had the opportunity in the last few days to assess whether or not Boris could lead that team and build that unity. And I came, as I say, reluctantly but firmly to the conclusion that while Boris has many talents and attributes, he wasn't capable of building that team.
A surprising decision because he said this more than once.
I could not be Prime Minister. I'm not equipped to be Prime Minister. I don't want to be Prime Minister.
Back at what had been supposed to be Boris Johnson's launch, some of his supporters were clearly upset. Others were choosing their words carefully.
We had a team that was really credible and could fight that fight. When bits of that team publicly step away from that, then that makes it harder for us as a team. This was always a team game. Boris was the captain of the team, no doubt, but it was always a team game.
So now Theresa May looks like the front runner. Her campaign launch was before Boris Johnson pulled out, but after Michael Gove had come in.
Did you welcome the entry of Michael Gove into this race? And what do you make of his comments about Boris Johnson, that he decided that Boris couldn't provide the leadership or build a team for the task that's required?
Well, I mean, it's for Michael to comment. He's been working for Boris with Boris for many weeks now, but I welcome an open contest.
Even though she campaigned to remain, she said the new leader must take Britain out of the EU, and she addressed what's sometimes seen as a weakness.
And I know I'm not a showy politician. I don't tour the television studios. I don't gossip about people over lunch. I don't go drinking in Parliament's bars. I don't often wear my heart on my sleeve. I just get on with the job in front of me.
Mr Johnson, have you been done over by Mr Gove?
No doubt he has his own views on that, but for now Boris Johnson has played the game and lost. We don't know who will be Britain's next Prime Minister, but we do know it won't be him.
Speak to Andy in just a minute. After all that, though, who are the official candidates for Tory leader and Prime Minister, and where do they stand? As you've heard, there's the Home Secretary Theresa May, a Remain campaigner during the referendum, Justice Secretary Michael Gove, a major Leave supporter, Work and Pension Secretary Stephen Crabb is another Remain campaigner, while former Defence Secretary Liam Fox was on the Leave side. He stood for the Tory leader in 2005, the battle won by David Cameron. Then there's Andrea Leadsom, Energy Minister and a prominent campaigner for Leave. And here is how they're going to be elected. Conservative MPs will vote for their choice until just 2 candidates remain. Then it's up to all members of the Conservative Party to vote to choose their favourite of the 2. The winner, the new leader and Prime Minister, will be announced on the 9th of September. Let's speak to Andy in Westminster now. As you've said, Theresa May, the front runner. What about, though, that spectacular falling out between Boris Johnson and Michael Gove?
Well, I understand that it came as a complete bolt from the blue as far as Boris Johnson was concerned. I understand that there was no attempt made to contact him by Michael Gove, and that Boris Johnson found out about Michael Gove's move basically at the same time as the rest of us at about 9 o'clock this morning. Now, as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of anger floating around at what was supposed to have been Boris Johnson's launch today, away from the cameras. Untrustworthy was the adjective being bandied about, sometimes attached to an expletive. I have to say, not just directed at Michael Gove, but also one MP who had been expecting to back Boris Johnson said he was off to back Theresa May because he said the Leave campaigners had revealed themselves to be completely chaotic and untrustworthy. It does look as if Michael Gove was looking at the members of Parliament. Remember, they're the ones who finally make the decision as who of the 2 MPs that go through for the final round of the leadership, and that Michael Gove had concluded very late last night that he had a better chance of getting through than Boris Johnson. But it has been an extraordinary day here. Boris Johnson, until yesterday, considered the favourite, now out, and it looks as if Theresa May is the front runner.
Andy, thank you. Well, if the Conservatives have had a turbulent day, Labour's has hardly been any smoother. Angela Eagle, the MP expected to formally challenge Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, decided to hold back for a while. But he's not off the hook yet. He's also found himself at the centre of a row about anti-Semitism while launching an inquiry into anti-Semitism in his party. Julian Drucker reports.
It's been a tumultuous week for Jeremy Corbyn, and this was only Thursday morning.
Good morning, everybody. Are you up for this leadership challenge, Mr Corbyn?
As it seemed he was just hours from being challenged for the leadership of the party, Mr Corbyn had other business to attend to. He was supposed to be speaking about the inquiry findings into alleged anti-Jewish sentiment in Labour. But he also reacted to the events of the last few days.
We all know that despite the overwhelming mandate that was given by Labour Party members and supporters last year, we've all had a torrid few days. Well, at least I have. Whatever now takes place in our party, politics should be conducted in a decent manner.
Morning.
This is the woman who could make his week even more torrid.
I'll be saying something later today.
But former Shadow Business Secretary Angela Eagle appears to have now delayed her bid to oust Mr Corbyn. Their party isn't a hotbed of anti-Jewish feeling or any other racism, according to the inquiry by civil liberties campaigner Shami Chakrabarti. Mr Corbyn said he'd shortly implement her recommendations.
Mr Corbyn, how difficult is it going to be to change the party, given the problems you're having at the top of the party?
I hope the whole party will come absolutely together, thank Shami for her work, and see this as a seminal turning point in how our party behaves, and give ourselves a framework to ensure there is no racism whatsoever at any place or any level in our party. I think the party will come together.
And are you the person to lead the party to do that?
I am the leader of the party, and I'm doing that.
But before he does that, he's under fire for appearing to compare Israel with IS.
Our Jewish friends are no more responsible for the actions of Israel or the Netanyahu government than our Muslim friends are for those various self-styled Islamic states or organisations.
Then, Labour MP Ruth Smeeth, who's Jewish, was verbally abused by one of Mr Corbyn's grassroots supporters. She stormed out after Mr Corbyn failed to intervene. She's now accused him of showing a catastrophic failure of leadership. Tonight, as Jeremy Corbyn clung on for another day, he issued this online statement. But his defiance was marred by a misspelling of his own name. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
Well, one man trying to offer a little calm today was the Governor of the Bank of England. Mark Carney says although the result of the referendum is clear, the effect on the economy is not, and that uncertainty means that the bank will need to make changes over the summer. That could mean a cut to interest rates. Let's talk to Simon Vigar, who's in the city. What more has Mark Carney been saying, Simon?
Yeah, Sian, he has to be reassuring, telling people that he's got most of the bases covered, the bases he can cover, but a hint at a cut in interest rates, already a record low of 0.5%, could go down to 0.25%. Talking about insecurity and uncertainty, usually very cool and measured, but there was a hint of irritation when his pre-referendum warning of recession was questioned.
What we said in terms of the risks to the economic outlook, in terms of the risks to financial stability, does anyone in this room not think that those risks have begun to manifest? Does anyone in the country think that those risks have not begun to manifest?
So a little insight there. He was saying there are limits to what we can do here at the Bank of England. The Monetary Policy Committee meets in mid-July. In reaction, the markets, well, the pound down a bit. The FTSE share index is actually at a 2-month high after the losses last week, after the referendum result. Mark Carney today saying plan beats no plan. A bit of a dig from the City of London here down the road to what's happening in the City of Westminster.
Simon, thank you. Still to come on the programme. Calls for a nationwide review into children's intensive care units after the deaths of 7 children. And following the Oscars race row, the new plan to stop the ceremony being so white. All that and more after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. The parents of a 4-year-old boy who died after heart surgery at a children's hospital in Bristol have hit out at an official report. Sean Turner was one of 7 children who died after treatment at the Royal Hospital. An independent review had found that patients were regularly given poor care and that parents were let down. But Sean's parents have told Dominic Reynolds the report is a whitewash.
Horrendous. It's just your worst nightmare as a parent, seeing your child in so much pain.
Sean Turner suffered in the days before he died. His mum and dad believe it didn't need to happen, that Sean should still be here. They've waited years for today's report into the unit where he was treated, but now they've read it, they say it's a whitewash.
We just can't take it in. Why 2 years has been spent and they've produced this? It still doesn't go far enough. It's not making people accountable for allowing that ward to be that unsafe. And that's all we wanted.
The review into cardiac care at Bristol Children's Hospital was centred here, Ward 32. Looking at the deaths of 7 children in particular, it found that problems here put patients at risk of harm. The review's made 32 recommendations. They include making sure staffing levels are adequate, reviewing how staff communicate with families about their child's diagnosis and about what's likely to happen afterwards. And it's also called for a nationwide review into paediatric intensive care units like this one. But the language in the report isn't damning. Its author describes much of the care as less good.
Well, less good is a bit of a shorthand, isn't it, for all sorts of failings that parents told us about. Things like alarms not being responded to quickly, things like medication not arriving on time, things like fluid balances not being accurately charted, and in particular a concern that staff didn't have the time and the space to reflect on what was happening.
The hospital's boss, still in his job, says his resignation wouldn't help.
We put in a huge range of improvement, millions of pounds invested in new medical and nursing staff, new facilities and equipment. I think the important thing is that I lead the team now to implement the recommendations of this report and ensure, convince ourselves and the families who've been party to this report that those recommendations have been taken seriously.
But Sean's mum sees it differently.
He needs to step down.
You want him to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This unit has spent a lot of time under scrutiny. A public inquiry 15 years ago found major shortcomings. Today's report is less critical, and Sean's parents say it's left them let down by the system again. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News in Warminster.
Police investigating the deadly attack on Istanbul's main airport have arrested 13 people in a series of raids. The attack on Ataturk Airport killed at least 44 people and injured more than 250. Turkish officials say the 3 suspected suicide bombers were from so-called Islamic State. A woman who wants to use her dead daughter's eggs to give birth to her own grandchild has won a court appeal. The 60-year-old woman says before her daughter died in 2011, she made it her wish that her mother carried her babies. Danny Sinhar's with me. Danny, what's the background to this?
This is an extraordinary legal case involving a woman who effectively wants to give birth to her own grandchild using her dead daughter's eggs, frozen eggs. Now, her daughter died of cancer back in 2011. She'd actually frozen her eggs before that, and as far as her mother is concerned, she wanted her to carry her babies. Now, last year, the UK fertility regulator, they refused to give permission to the mother. She'd wanted to take these eggs to a US clinic and get them fertilised, but they'd said no, and this is a case really that's been dragged through the courts for a number of years. Last year, this woman lost a High Court case, and that's really boils down to one fact. The UK's fertility regulator, they couldn't be sure that the daughter had given proper written consent. Instead, the mother had said she'd given verbal consent.
So what happens now, then?
Well, today the Court of Appeal have said the case should actually be reviewed again. And so it all shifts back to the fertility regulator. They've been asked to review things again. Now, there are various issues that will have to be considered. And we've been speaking to the Professor of Medical Ethics really to look at some of those considerations.
The primary one is the ethical issue. Did this woman give consent or not? From my reading of the case, she gave consent, ethically speaking. Legally speaking, did she sign the right forms? That's a legal issue, and that's up to the lawyers and the HFEA to decide.
So the final decision really now rests with the UK fertility regulator. But as far as the grandmother's concerned, she wants to carry out her dead daughter's wishes.
Danny, thank you. Now they're the people who decide which films and which stars win Hollywood's biggest awards. And after that row about a lack of diversity among this year's nominees, the Oscar committee invited a new intake, and among them, hundreds of non-white stars, including some British actors, Idris Elba and John Boyega. Millie Stevenson reports.
3, 2, 1.
This year's Oscar nominees posing for their official photo, a sea of white faces. And behind the image, anger. When not a single black actor was nominated in the major categories, it dominated the ceremony inside.
Man, I counted at least 15 black people on that montage.
And out, where we filmed this protest. The Academy promised to make the Oscars less white. Those were the words, now for the action. Announcing their largest ever intake of new members, Idris Elba is one of hundreds invited to join their voting panel. Star Wars actor John Boyega, also one of those chosen. Today he said he hoped he'd spark a change. Almost half of those newly invited to join the Academy are women, including Brits Emma Watson and Kate Beckinsale. But how much of a difference will it make? Well, at the moment, there is a panel of over 6,000 Academy voters. Nearly 700 more have now been invited. If they all accept the offer, the membership would still mostly be white, male and over 60. Male voters would slip from 75% to 73%, while white members would still make up the majority, going from 92% to 89%. Akua Jamphi set up the UK's first database to represent black actors and says this is finally a step in the right direction.
It's a start. It can't just end here. We've added some non-white people into, that's it. This has to continue. We have to see the results. Does this make a difference? Does there need to be more? Does there need to be a bit of a colour at the top even more? Lots of things need to be discussed post this decision, but this is what I'm enthusiastic about, is that they've listened.
The Academy say they want to open their doors wider. When next year's nominees are revealed, we'll know if they have. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Now, before we go, let's have a quick look at what's coming up on 5 News tonight. And Matt has spent the day at Westminster on another huge day for British politics.
An awful lot of things happening today. Boris Johnson's out of the Tory leadership race. Theresa May is in. And, well, are we even going to have a Labour leadership race? An awful lot to talk about. I've been garnering opinions down here in Westminster. Hear those and the rest of the day's stories at 6:30 on 5 News tonight.
Yes, I do hope you can join Matt at 6:30. That is it for us for now, though. Sian Welby has the weather next. I'll see you again next week. Matt's back in an hour. Thanks for watching tonight. Goodbye for now.